Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ, where today we're going to imagine if today was the day of ravens. Yes, we're going to talk about fantasy role playing, all of your favorite D20 systems, and beyond. Where imagine each day when you arrive here in this live podcast, we're going to talk about the day, and each day will be different. Today, we're going to talk about the Day of Ravens, but before we do that, let's get into the intro. All right, so in fantasy role playing, many times we refer to celestial events. And in this context, we're going to talk about a day that is represented by some kind of person, place, thing, animal, feature, and whatnot. And each day that we arrive at this podcast, we're going to imagine our fantasy role playing as if it is upon a specific styled day. And then we're going to take that and just basically dive deep, discuss, and maybe go a little bit too nerdy into what do these days mean. So today we're going to talk about the Day of Ravens. And not to offend real world crows, we're going to kind of like embrace them as well, if you prefer. There is a biological difference between ravens and crows, but we understand in our fantasy role playing game that raven just has a really cool name and sound to it, a kind of a punctuation, and so we're going to deal with that. Now, in one great way to pull from our to get inspired by a thing is to pull from, well, real world mythology and rumors and beliefs and things of that nature that people had in our ancient days, and then we kind of take it and twist it for our role playing games, turn the volume up a bit, and see where we come from. So for example, in some tales of the wealth myth cycle, the I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, uh, capital M Mabinogion or Mabinogion. The raven is a harbinger of death. Witches and sorcerers were believed to have the ability to transform themselves into ravens and fly away, thus enabling them to evade capture. The Native Americans often saw the raven as a trickster, much like the coyote. As a carrion bird, ravens became associated with the dead and with lost souls. In Swedish folklore, they are the ghosts of murdered people without Christian burials, and in German stories, damned souls. In folklore throughout the world, the raven is a symbol of change and opportunity. They are also seen as intermediaries between the material and spirit worlds. Because they eat carrion, ravens have long been associated with death and even bad luck. And humanity from the beginning of time has been enamored and mystified and fearful even of death and where that comes from, and carrion hey and carrion beings have been part of our mythology, and there's a bit of a distance we have, but also a that mystery draws us to them, and I believe that ravens are the same way. And thank you very much here for being here. For those who do not know, please check out Shy Squad and their music. Do not hesitate. And thanks very much for stopping by. So today being the Day of Ravens, how can we use that to add to our role playing experience? using a day, a celestial period of time in our role playing games allows us to both flavor wise and mechanically have things happen. Like, for example, on this day of ravens, maybe it's a foretelling that the players will encounter these dark winged um, uh, avians flying around overhead. Does it mean that in a more mundane sense that there are dead bodies? Oh no, you don't even worry about that, dude. Uh, uh, I appreciate your presence. It's been a long time too, but anyway, so you can have flocks of these ravens and crows flying overhead, and in a literal sense, maybe there's a lot of dead bodies. It could be animals that were slain, or there was a battlefield that just happened, and the players are able to see the flocks of birds flying overhead. Maybe it is a calling card of sorts. Oftentimes in fantasy role playing games, Dungeons and Dragons and other D20 systems and beyond, ravens and crows tend to be familiars. Witches and warlocks and wizards can see through their eyes, and these birds can send messages. Of course, in the Game of Thrones, they used ravens. They sent ravens, and they had messages attached to them. So this could tell the players in your game that there's some shadowy figure or figures afoot in the recent area, or they could just be trained by a particular faction or clan, tribe, or nobility, and being used to track the comings and goings of the player characters or some other individuals as well, if you just want to have them in the background. Also, it could be a harbinger of death, and just flavor wise, maybe death is on the horizon for people through disease, famine, war, or a raven lands nearby an important NPC, and the PCs are like, oh man, it's like, what? Like, maybe this person's going to die pretty soon. Yeah. Yeah. That. Thank you very much. I haven't done those eclipse phase videos in quite a while, and I've had some. I've the channel has been on a pause because of some internet issues. So yeah, need to find a new internet provider. Oh man, I appreciate that, and the fact that you even remember that. That you remember that, I'm real. It flatters me. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been. This old man's been doing this for quite a while. Y'all young whippersnappers out there. Anyway, um, Ravens mechanically, maybe on a day of Ravens, maybe there is a higher percentage or propensity for death in your game. Maybe modifying those death saves if you're doing like a 5e or 5e clone variant. Maybe the numbers start to change a little bit. Healing may not work as well. The numbers might change in as a drawback to what the players do. Maybe even it's even possible that food items and other things become spoiled, and it's very difficult to find nutritional meals because the death and famine is on the horizon. Now, if we are specific about the Day of Ravens, in a sense of each day is a different day related to something, and I think Shy Squad would even remember this one. Back in the day, there is a role playing game called Within the Ring of Fire, and it took the concept of each day a particular deity or spirit or godling or titan or whatever sat upon a throne, and that day became their day. And each day, specifically 24 hours or however long your fantasy gaming is, the Day of Ravens, maybe people know this day is coming and they prepare themselves, maybe trying to harvest food, collect water so it doesn't spoil or whatnot. And then when that Day of Ravens come, they know that when the ravens fly around and land upon people's homes or heck, even their shoulders, that those people are destined to death and there's no way to avoid it. Which also brings in the fact that we can start to include some of our unsavory monsters and adversaries in this, and maybe they only come about on this day of ravens. Um, Having the idea that it is a harbinger for death or whatnot could bring ghosts and wraiths and whites, WIGHTs, into a city or town or countryside as they flow through. They could also, maybe this is a maybe this isn't as harmful and deadly, but people write notes, and when the ravens land, they are able to tie the notes um, to hand to the ravens, and the ravens take the notes and fly into the spirit world to take their notes back to their loved ones. This could be very a more of a spiritual journey, getting into more of a like some of our favorite adversaries. Of course, we have to have yeah, oh yeah, yeah, Shai Squad, yes, yeah, the 77 thrones. Yep, the divinities of Kavega Thal, legendary. Yep, 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 absolutely. Well, one of the do, as far as indie games go, one of the first. I have to bring those books out. Maybe I'll do that. Kind of like a revisit. I don't know. Maybe I might do that. Maybe I might a little bit. No, sorry about that. If I pierce someone's ears with that one. But yeah, some of our favorite monsters and adversaries. Listen, you don't need to follow anyone's rules. So if you want to give the ability of some of your favorite adversaries and give them the ability to transform into a raven or a crow, and just give them the shape changing ability, or under their control they have these flocks of ravens or crows that follow them wherever they go. Definitely give it to them. Hags fit into this, nagas, um, ogre magi, rakshasa fit easily into this kind of thing. And of course, let's not forget that, of course, there is in fifth edition this idea of the Raven Queen, but you can attach this to any type of entity that you wish. Altering the gender oftentimes throws people off because mythologically, more of the male myths tend to be more bestial, giant size, monstrous, animalistic, and the more female gendered mythology tends towards deception, destruction, seduction, but flipping it on its head, meaning maybe they're not witches, maybe they are the literal aspect of warlocks, not gaming wise, but men in a cult or something that are able to draw upon dark powers that give them the ability to control, transform, or bring flocks of these birds around. Also, in flowing back into the practical sense, yeah, yeah, okay. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I will revisit it. Yeah, I'm always game for anybody that's got a great idea and kind of sparks the creativity in me. I'm always like, yeah, let's go back. Let's go ahead and do that. Um, as far as I'm a huge proponent of exploration, using the environment, the background, from as small as creating hazards that player characters have to roll dice to avoid, all the way to the bigger aspect of exploration. And this Day of Ravens can really have an effect on that. For example, um, going back to death being on the horizon, like harbingers of death. Again, maybe it's very difficult to find when surviving out in the wild, carrying food items, carrying water, searching for game, hunting, fishing, and things of that nature. Everyone knows, everyone knows that the Day of Ravens, there's no fish to be found. You go out into the dreaded woods and there's no sounds at all. You don't hear crickets, you don't hear owls, you don't hear anything. And that might throw the player characters off with the preternatural stillness. Yep, yeah, yeah, Shy Squads. Yeah, funny you mentioned the females deception. Yeah, Andrea is a great the goddess of lies, Liptif or Loptif. I think if I'm not mistaken, either that was the goddess or there was another one that was hiding, that would hide as other gods, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, got to revisit those books. And when I say revisit them, I mean they're sitting on my shelf in the background, but beyond the screen. But yeah, I got to pull them back out again. Yeah, absolutely. But also maybe like flocks of ravens, fly down and in the middle of combat and disrupt people's spell casting, or yeah, the archer or the crossbow person in the group goes to aim, and flocks of ravens are flying around, disrupting. Cutting off sight lines and disrupting things. You could absolutely reflavor, recontextualize, repurpose, reuse something. So if you want to have dim light, darkness, fog, mist that prevents people from being able to see and have sight lines. Flocks of ravens and crows kind of fit into that as well. Um, uh, Maybe there are consequences for the players to do things like, for example, if there was a raven or a crow sitting around and one of the players wants to take a pop shot and put an arrow or a bolt through one, maybe something pretty terrible happens to that player character later on. Spell effects like bane or curse affect them or something. Or, for every raven that you kill, they're attached to some mystic entity out there that is like, ooh, you did that? Okay, we're going to come after you sevenfold. Yeah, Shay says Latif was the one where every time you told a falsehood, you were unwittingly saying a prayer to her and boosting her power. I love that. Yeah, pretty clever. Yeah, I love that. The idea that, going back to this idea of the 77 thrones. This is from a specific role playing game, but you can actually you steal these ideas and of course support the role playing game as well. Um, but yes, you could um, take these ideas and use them. And so maybe the deity, the godling, the demigod, the oops, running of fire. The maybe the idea that during this period of time, their power is greater than any others during this period, and so therefore, when you talk aloud and you speak, like this idea of like if you say a lie, it brings power. It brings power to that individual or that being or that godling or something of that nature. It's also possible. It's also possible that the. I'm sorry. I'm at the same time I'm talking. I'm trying to get the get the link, and bam, here we go, and paste it right here. So if anyone wants to know what I'm talking about when it comes to within the Ring of Fire, there's a link in the chat that I just posted. I may put it down in the doobly doo when I get a chance, but yeah. Yep. Shai Sasko says, anyway, getting back to the Raven theme, what do you think of Odin's raven in Norse mythology, where the raven was like a guiding figure, a noble and non-malevolent creature? And to be very, first of all, I love that concept as well. And to be very generalized, because I'm not an expert on Norse mythology, but their that culture, that Norse Viking culture, in many ways, I mean, they kind of faced death on a daily basis, so they kind of embraced death. They didn't fear it as much as many other cultures around the world were, and I think it having a relationship between the physical world and the spiritual world, and they didn't really, from my outsider's perspective, they didn't really see a difference between them. I kind of like it. I mean, maybe this could be a one-off. The Day of Ravens, the player characters are able to, they are guided to the spirit world, and they're able to step into the spirit world between life and death, and maybe come across individuals that they killed in many weeks, months, years ago, and confront them again. Or they go on a spiritual journey where they don't realize that they think they're physically walking into a spiritual realm where everything they see is kind of flipped on its head, but then come to find out they were just sleeping. They were all sleeping in camp, and really only an hour's passed by. Um, it could also be a thing where during the Day of Ravens, maybe the undead are brought back, and they are ghosts, or maybe they come back in their physical forms to confront a wrong or finish a journey, or like in where Odin often guided many of the heroes into Valhalla to battle upon fields, and maybe this is a way to a failure in the past. Maybe the players were unable or had to run from an enemy, even though in role playing games, running tends to not happen too often. But it could be instead of instead of only guiding the players to death, it could be a guide to, here's an opportunity to, you could die, but here's an opportunity to become a great hero. And again, ravens and crows kind of being messengers. Oftentimes Odin, um, uh, why the other gods didn't realize this, but when the raven came around in the Norse mythology, it was Odin watching everyone else, especially his son Thor and many of the other gods that were running around. And it could be that there's a very powerful entity going like, I just want to see what you're going to do, and I'm going to watch from afar. Also, having a raven be a conduit towards like your big bad evil guy, it's kind of fun to do with the player characters, especially if you let them talk or drop notes or something. It's a good way to like the player characters understand that on the horizon there's a big bad, and the raven is just an avatar of that being. It wouldn't matter how many arrows they put through the raven. They could kill one a day, if whatever. You could always add more to your game, but it could be the big bad going like, player characters, I see you succeeded where so many others have failed. Maybe you will, I will recruit you into my fold, or stop you from disrupting my evil plans, or something like that. Yeah, Shice is like, yeah, neither am I as far as knowledgeable about Norse mythology. But the idea was the raven would always find the land for these Viking sailors. So the raven sat on Odin's shoulder to symbolize his wisdom. And that very much, if I recall many times through Norse mythology, that great wisdom came about, but it came at a cost. Um, Odin I believe, had to remove his eye, or maybe it was poked out or something by a raven. I believe there was another period of time where Odin had to place his body and basically pierce his body upon the world tree or something to gain vast knowledge. And what an easy thematic way to draw the players into the next adventure. One or more of the player characters sees the raven, and the raven speaks to them within their soul, never says a word, but they understand that they need to follow the raven towards the front door of the adventure and go into room 1A, and maybe the raven becomes that kind of thing. And the raven could also be a conduit for the players to meet maybe uh, villagers, nobles, whatever, if they follow and treat this small animal with some kind of respect and understand its meaning, and believe what the people say about the meaning, that the strange adventurers, an elf with black skin and a humanoid being with scales like a dragon walks into town with another individual with demonic horns, but then there's a raven flies overhead, and the people go, oh, that's a good omen. Maybe we should trust these people. Uh, Absolutely. I also think when it comes to the explorative nature of a thing, to have again, having the raven be a disrupting feature. For example, the player characters come across a small town. They explain to the players that, if the players are interested, about the culture. Hey, listen, it's the Day of Ravens. Be aware that anyone that touches upon the mystic weave of magic or something has a greater chance, propensity to cause magic to surge and summon the dead, or to have it reflect back at them or something. And now you're introducing a new rule. And when the players get ready to cast a spell or read an ancient text or break an ancient curse or something of that nature, that you're going to introduce a new rule. Like, hey, I made a D12 random table, and every time you cast a spell, maybe we're going to do that. So the Day of Ravens, and as we move forward through this podcast each day, tomorrow I believe is the Day of Horns. We're going to do for Wednesday. Thursday will be the Day of Fire, and then Friday we're going to do the Day of Wolves, and we're going to each day will be a different thematic feature. Yeah, we could do that. Now, also, just because of how intelligent ravens are, ravens and crows, I'm throwing crows in here as well. It's an opportunity for, gift the player characters with a little something. Maybe one of the player characters who normally doesn't gain magic and those kind of things, maybe the fighter of the group, you grant them a raven, and they get the ability to have a familiar that's a raven, and you give this to them temporarily or permanent for their character because they fought off death and destruction or something, or the players are able to exercise the souls of the wandering dead and allow the spirits to go on into the new world, and as a result, one of the spirits of the dead children or something is so thankful that their parents were able to go with them into the world of the dead, and they look back, and when they look back, they transform into a raven and follow the player characters and warn them of death and dangers that come ahead. Also, they could just be simple messengers trained to deliver a note here and there. Maybe a player character, you want to incorporate some of the player characters' backgrounds, their loved ones, their friends. Maybe they let's go back to Fight Tour, and maybe they have a really good relationship with some people that were in a military campaign when the characters were 0 level, and there's a back and forth, a pen pal relationship that one of the player characters has with an NPC. And what a great way to kind of add that in. Instead of the NPC traveling with them, they're just communicating with notes tied to or carried by the Raven. And the player character, maybe at the beginning of each session, has like their notes from last session kind of idea written on a scrawled piece of note. And even though the player characters have sailed across high seas and hacked their way through a jungle, here comes the Raven, and Raven lands on the PC's arm, and they read the note from their NPC that's important to them. That may be kind of a cool idea. Shai says, incidentally, do you ever see genuine ravens in real life very often? I don't believe I have. Every time I think I see one, it turns out to be nothing but a large crow. I'm throwing crows into the mix, even though I'm sure like the ravens are like, we're the important ones here. Leave your crow talk somewhere else. But I'm throwing them in here too because corvids are extremely intelligent. I remember seeing a flock. It's probably a flock of crows because I believe ravens usually hang out in pairs and crows hang out in flocks. But anyway, I remember they fought off an owl. I believe an owl's trying to attack their nesting area or something, and they were pretty vicious. But in reality, there have been people who fed crows and ravens and fed them, and then those birds told other birds and of their kind, whether they were ravens or crows, and then found those individuals and looked out for them, and they would bring these human beings they would find debris and design gifts for them to give to them in trade for the food that they had. They also tend to play. So there are videos of like ravens and crows, like when it's wintertime, they'll slide down someone's steep roof just to play in the snow. They will understand they've been known to understand what writing is and understand where it is. They've been known to follow human beings that have moved from their homes and moved someplace else because they know that human being maybe um, found an injured avian and brought them back and nursed them back to health, and the other birds, are like appreciative of it. So that intelligence, that brilliance, I think is something that we could really pull from as well. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going like, oh, I think they're ravens, but they're actually crows. Listen, unless you're an avian expert, I don't think it really matters for us in the sense of like us appreciating the wonder of that. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like I think I've re-edited some of my memories. Like, yeah, that was a raven following me, or you know what I mean. Yeah, Shai's like, oh yeah, by all means, don't sell the crows short. I just wish ravens were easier to tell apart. On another tangent, are you familiar with Stalos, the 36th spirit of the Ars Goetia? I am not familiar with that at all. But the beginning of that, I think. Let's see if I was able to find the differences between. I swear I was able to find it. Ravens and crows. And I think the way for us to tell the differences is little bit more difficult than we would give it credit for. It's like, for example, um, here we go. You're outside enjoying a sunny day when a shadow at your feet causes you to look up. A large black bird flies over and lands in a nearby tree. You wonder, is that a raven or a crow? These two species, common ravens and American crows, overlap widely throughout North America, and they look quite similar. But with a bit of practice, you can tell them apart. You probably know that ravens are larger, the size of a red-tailed hawk. Ravens often travel in pairs. Here it is, yeah, while crows are seen in larger groups. Also, watch the bird's tail as it flies overhead. The crow's tail feathers are basically the same length, so when the bird spreads its tail, it opens like a fan. Ravens, however, have longer middle feathers in their tail, so their tail appears wedge shaped when open. Listen closely to the bird's calls. Crows give a cawing sound, but ravens produce a lower croaking sound. Yeah, and there's videos of the differences between them. While crows caw and purr, ravens croak and scream bloody murder. Yeah, a murder. What's the term? A murder of crows? I don't know if that's used for ravens, but it could be. Ravens ride thermals and soar, whereas crows do more flapping. Also, as mentioned in podcasts, the raven's tail resembles a wedge compared to the rounded fan-like shape of crows. Ravens have bigger, curvier beaks relative to crows. While both species have bristles at the base of the neck, the ravens are noticeably longer. Its throat feathers are also quite shaggy. So a raven tends to have that more of like upraised, longer feathers around the head and neck, and crows tend to be smoother, piercier, arrow knife faced, whereas ravens are a little more blunt, slightly more blunt. So that's awesome. That's kind of went down a little there. Yeah. Anyway, um, I think if we attach these ravens to some of our bad guys, I think it's a I think it's a great idea to do that because we can kind of recontextualize them. Like let's think of some monsters or adversaries that normally would not be associated with ravens or crows, but would give them a new feature. For example, giants or what's I'm trying to think of, plants even, or something of that nature. If the players are given enough information, or the players explore enough and interact enough with people in your world, where when the day of ravens comes and they say, hey, listen, anybody or anything that's touched by the raven, give it respect. It will lead you to great knowledge, but there'll also be great danger. And then the players come across frost giants or something, and the ravens, one of the frost giants is Odin like in its maybe the frost giant's got a huge beard. Its back is kind of like hunched over. You could tell he's got a very ancient. He's using an old large oak tree as a cane as it's going along the frozen north or something. Maybe that frost giant isn't, hey, roll initiative, let's fight. Maybe that frost giant can lead the player characters to great knowledge, or maybe this frost giant was a great warrior at one time, but all of his people have died, and he's still trying to. Maybe he's got a bag full of runic stones that have the names carved upon it, upon all the great warriors, and he's trying to take it to the vast north or back to the battle lands or something, so that their people's spirits can go on. And the player characters are like, oh, okay, maybe they you can recontextualize the, oh, it's not roll initiative, let's fight frost giants, but they also have a culture too, and then they work together. And once the players grab the giant stones, because the giant may think they're little pebbles, to the player characters are like, these runic stones are 50 pounds a piece, I don't know if we can carry these, but they take them up north and take them to this great battlefield or something. And then all of a sudden maybe that giant falls over and dies, knowing that they can they can rest, but the raven sticks around just a little bit longer, following the player characters or something of that nature, and then you tell the player characters, okay, let's get to the mechanical thing. Hey, you guys are able to summon one from the spirit worlds, one frost giant to help you fight in one battle. Only once will the I don't know, the membrane between the living and the dead be pierced, and a frost giant will come, the greatest warrior ever, or something. And when that great warrior arrives, used only once, is that hunched over frost giant that was dying. It was actually a great warrior or something like that, with an eye patch and an 8-limbed horse, or you know what I mean. Anyway, Shai says, exactly. I like to pretend I've seen ravens at symbolic moments, but they were almost certainly just crows. Thanks for the description on how to identify. I'm going to have to remember that. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about actually putting that in here, but why the hell not? So, um, anyway, to tie this up, so I'm not spending or taking much of you and all of your valuable times. As we move forward, we're going to take uh, a day and imagine this day, a celestial event in your fantasy world, the day of, and fill it with anything. And if you have any ideas that you can throw out there, and they don't have to be thought out ideas. This is unscripted, unresearched. I like to go by the seat of my pants, and to try to give some inspiration, mind fuel, use something. Listen, the collective is far more brilliant than us as individuals. And so if you want to throw something out there like, hey, do the day of ice cream, or the day of broccoli, or the day of the little plastic tabs on the end of shoelaces. We're not going to get that deep into it. But if you have something out there, like something as very general, like the day of dragons or day of giants, or something more specific, like the day of silver, the day of swords, anything out there at all, we're gonna go ahead and discuss it. And the more of you that join in live or respond in the comments, the more we can just delve upon this. So before we get out of here, I will say that you can also use the Day of Ravens, as something on the horizon, because one of the greatest tools that we can have as facilitators, narrators, storytellers, flame tenders, game masters, dungeon masters, is to use time. Time, time. And the shorter the time, the greater the tension and the pressure. And that's one of our greatest tools we can put in our back pocket. And if you let the players know, hey, 3 days hence during your travels, when you arrive in the town of I don't know, Mistblade, on the coast of the Grand Coast or whatever, and you get there and it's foggy, and the player characters are um, absolutely aware that when they arrive in the small town, for their adventure that it will be the Day of Ravens, it kind the tension can start to build. Well, what does this mean? What's going to happen? Um, is suddenly when they find, I don't know, the lizard folk tribe or something, and there's a shamanic priest, and the shamanic priest in the lizard folks tribe has a little staff, and the raven flies and lands upon the staff, and the PCs are like, that raven has been following us for 3 days, and it's the Day of Ravens. I wonder what this means, or the player characters go to do something, and the the paladin goes to smite an enemy or something like that, and there's just a little bit something different that happens to in and around the player characters, or the raven. There was an old television show from the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, where a raven used to land, and in its place used to leave these arrows. And the hero would grab the arrows, and when he shoots the arrows, he would shoot them, and they would explode amongst a group of people. And it was cheap. This was a pretty cheap effect. But what would happen is, because they didn't want to show people literally being pierced with arrows, they would just turn the screen red, and you would see all the bad guys, like as if an explosion went off, and they would all fall to the ground and jump as if something exploded. But it was actually just the screen turning red. And I don't remember the name of this it was like a made for TV movie. This is back in the day before cable and all that kind of stuff was a big thing. But the hero would have these limited number of arrows because he would run out of them. And then during the travels, the hero would walk along, and a raven would fly, or a crow would fly and land. And then when they would leave, there would be a set of arrows, and the hero would put the arrows into the quiver and start to travel on. I don't know. It wasn't a cartoon. This was live action, but it was something like that. I just remember I just remember being enamored with it. I'm sure if I found clips of it today, it was people like, oh, it looks pretty bad. But at the time, I just remember it was awesome. Also, again, adding in new random encounters, having random effects where magic is involved, attaching the ravens to some of your to twist some of your important adversaries, maybe elevating them a little bit, like instead of just regular lizard folk, maybe there's a shamanic priest that has these ravens, or maybe there's an old hag where the old hag is like begging for his or her life or something, but from the PCs are like, no, don't kill me. I can lead you to the treasure or something like that. Just follow the raven. Also, circling back to the more mundane effect of these birds eating carrion, maybe there's something dangerous on the horizon, a dangerous beast or werewolves or whatever, something like out there, boulets or axe beaks or whatever. And whenever it murder kills something, it leaves dead bodies. And of course, the player characters, the rangers, the druids of the group, or the player characters just learn, hey, let's follow the flock of birds circling overhead. It's going to lead us to the dangerous thing that's out there in the woods. So I really like this. I like this idea. We could go a little bit deeper, I think, but we're going to leave it at that. I don't want to take up too much of your very important and valuable time. For those of you who got here this long, please like, share, subscribe. The channel is going to be back to its form, and each day we're going to take a day and make that a day for use in your game for that day. So tomorrow we're going to do the Day of Horn, and just look for this channel, RPG with DBJ. You'll see that I will try to have the links up so you know exactly what's happening in the future. And again, this is Seat of the Pants. So if any of you out there have an idea to try something, or you hadn't even thought about using this as an idea in general, please just comment below and check it out. And by the way, again, check out Shy Squad and their music. Please do that. They've been around quite a bit of time and are experts, and have honed their musical expertise, something to which, by the way, if you're still here, Shy Scott, let people know where you're at physically around the world. If I'm not mistaken, the last time I remember, and this is 11 years ago. This was probably, you were probably in Germany at the time, where we were all part of the Anders um, Anders RPG creative landscape or whatever. It's kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate it. And listen, sometimes I'm here to just be like, hey, guess what? Let's just be creative and think of something to hang out on the side and go like, hadn't thought about it that way before. That's what I'm here for. So you guys make the channel better. So thank you very much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it. Guys, have a great one. I will see thee later. Have a great one. Peace. Mm-hmm.